What's up, plant people? It is March 3rd. It's a Tuesday in the year 2020, and I'm coming at you again with another great episode of the Planthropology Podcast. This is Vikram Baligi, your host, and I'm so excited to be talking to you today. This is going to be a good one. They're all good ones. Listen to them all. They're wonderful, but I'm really excited about today's. We're talking about insects and graduate school and life, and it's really just wonderful and a lot of fun. A couple of things first. We had our first live show 2 days ago on Sunday, the first at LubbockCon, and that was just a blast. It was so much fun. Thanks to everyone for coming out. If you want to watch that, it's in the Facebook group. I streamed it live. Also, it'll be coming out next week as a bonus episode. Actually, lots of great content coming at you this month. We've got today's episode, next week's bonus live show. A super secret, it's not that much of a secret, but a super special, awesome guest for episode 10 on the 17th. And then actually that next Tuesday, the 24th, I'm going to be doing a spring gardening and landscape tips episode at the request of a couple of people. People have been throwing questions at me, and I thought it'd be fun to take a little bit of time right after episode 10 to answer some of your questions and to celebrate spring. So I actually forgot on the last episode with my friend Kristen Bingham to read one of your reviews. And I can't believe I did that because I just started doing that. Actually, I can't believe it. That's like such a Vikram thing to do. So I'm actually going to read two reviews from iTunes today. The first one is by Psycho Bearcat, and it says, "Wonderful. I listened to all 8 episodes on an extended road trip to a science conference," which is, I mean, come on, that's the best kind of conference. "And it makes me so happy. Great idea, Vikram." Thanks, Psycho Bearcat. That's super cool. And the other one is by Crystal Bell 7, and it says, "One of my favorite podcasts. From horticulture to entomology, this podcast will surely brighten your day." Crystal, you're one of my favorite people. So that's super cool. You're all great, and I thank you so much for reviewing and rating and just commenting, being a part of the Facebook group, and all the cool stuff we do. Y'all are way rad. Is rad still a thing people say? I think I'm going to ask a question like that on every episode. Anyway, y'all are great. I really love y'all, and thanks so much for reviewing. It helps out a lot. So today's episode is with entomologist Erfan Vafaie, who by the way, when he gives presentations, has the very best pictorial description of how to say his name. It's hilarious. If you ever get this chance to see this guy speak, do it. He is an entomologist, an IPM specialist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. He's a doctoral candidate, just like I am, and a dad, and an improv comedian, and he's just hilarious and a super smart guy with really great insight into science and science communication. You may remember right before Christmas, I posted an episode with my son Bradley as our first bonus episode. If you haven't heard it, go listen to it, because this is the episode that he interrupted while I was recording it. Luckily, Erfan was very gracious. Again, he's got a little one as well, and I think he understood. But so that comes up. Little Bradley's voice pops in 2 or 3 times in this episode, but aside from that, I think we're ready to go, to rock and roll, as the kids say these days. Hello, fellow kids. Anyway, y'all are great. Can't wait for you to hear this episode. And here we go with episode 9 of Planthropology with my friend Erfan Vafaie. We're shooting for around half
2
an
hours.
hour.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 3 hours, just as long as we can talk.
I got a whole script written out. I'll just read it.
That's perfect. Yeah, it's great. It'll be like a monologue, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Gettysburg Address or something.
I just need you to nod periodically.
I will. I can do that. Yeah. All right. Well, we are live and recording. So thanks for being with me. I have Erfan Vafaie. I think I pronounced that wrong probably, but who is an entomologist with Texas A&M AgriLife Research. Is that correct?
Extension, yes.
Oh, you're on the extension side.
Yeah. I'm on the extension side. We do not talk or cross over to the research side.
Just as little as
that
possible,
is not true.
Right?
That is not true. That's a little running joke, but technically I'm on the extension side. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh yeah, no, I really appreciate your time, you coming on and chatting. And I was with Extension, so it's only kind of a joke. It's like a 60% joke.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on who you're talking to. You don't want to ruffle any feathers. So I'm going to say that it's just completely a joke. There's no tension there at all.
None at all. No. Okay. So anyway, I guess introduce yourself a little bit more. Tell us about your position, what you do, and what that entails.
Yeah, so I'm the extension program specialist, is like the full title, in integrated pest management. To kind of digest that a little bit, I essentially work with greenhouse growers and nursery growers. So anyone who grows bedding plants, trees, shrubbery, all those goodies. And I help them with a lot of pest management challenges, all the way from, preventing them to scouting them, to insecticide or biological control. And I do a combination of research and extension. So even though I'm technically with extension, there's unfortunately not a whole lot of us horticultural entomologists, as we maybe call ourselves, that are currently doing research in this field. So there's a great need. So I do a number of trials, a lot of research to try and find new answers for growers. Then I extend that information through websites, social media, presentations, so on and so forth, written materials. So that's kind of, what I do in a nutshell, I guess.
Okay, that's cool. I mean, and you're right. I think that maybe that the greenhouse entomology and the horticultural crop entomology probably is lacking on the research side. And so I think it's great that you get the opportunity to do both.
Oh yeah.
And so how did you get there? How did you get into entomology? What, I guess, things, because I always ask this question because I look at my own job and managing a greenhouse at university, and it's never like a straight line, right? There's always a weird winding trail that gets us here. So, what's your life been like? How'd you get here?
Yeah, it's funny that you ask, because, a lot of people in entomology, they were, doing insect collections in 4-H, or they in many ways started at a very young age and had a passion for it. I kind of started all the way, it wasn't until college that I even recognized entomology as a potential field of study. And, it really started with an increasing passion just for the scientific method, where I had a course, Dr. Brent Sinclair at the University of Western Ontario, or also known as Western Ontario now in Canada, where, we did actual labs where you're researching, reading primary literature, you're actually collecting data, doing the data analysis, analyzing that data. And I was like, this is really cool, because it's like detective work. I'd be sitting on the side of a building outside, reading papers and trying to find new methods or trying to find clues and hints on how to solve a particular issue. I just thought that was really cool. And so I ended up getting a summer job with Dr. Sinclair that summer. And he is a animal physiologist specializing in insect physiology. And specifically, he's looking at cold tolerance. So there are some insects that can tolerate being completely frozen and then thaw out when it warms up, and they're still alive. So it's basically, it's like cryopreservation, right? Like we talk about that, in fiction movies, they talk about that when they're doing space travel, having to freeze people and thaw them out. And so I was like, whoa, this is really cool. And they're trying to learn how to, artificially do that in species that can't do it naturally. So it was basically the beginning of cryopreservation. And so I thought that was really cool. From there, a couple other courses, ecology and chemical ecology with another, great, influencer in my life, Dr. Jeremy McNeil, who is a very good insect ecologist, very famous. And, from there, I started to become really passionate about interactions between insects, plants, insects, and insects. Because in this course, we'd learn, for example, that when a caterpillar chews on the plant, that plant can release these chemicals into the air, these volatiles that attracts predators of the caterpillar. So in a sense, plants are recruiting their own defenses. And it's this little mini alien war that's like constantly going on at this microscopic level in our backyard. So we just overlook it, we like look at an insect and we think it's gross. But from there, so I kind of fusing my passion for science and seeing a very practical application. So in this case, it was protection of agricultural commodities or protection of crops using ecology that then really just kept propelling me. And every summer I got new opportunities and new labs and so on and so forth. So that's kind of, what led me into this fork in my life, I guess.
Right. No, that's really interesting. And so like that, but that's something that nobody thinks about. I say that, not nobody. I think those are some things that in general people don't think about, right? They are kind of just interesting parts of our whole ecosystem and our whole agricultural system that are they're so small, or they're so maybe, I don't know what the word is, maybe other than what that we typically do, that we just overlook it. We don't think about this whole, you said alien warfare. I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. That world.
I mean, I always use this, this analogy when I'm giving my talks, especially to, different, gardener groups or different, master naturalists, master gardeners and whatnot, that really, these, a lot of fictional movies you see are based on insects in many ways. Like the movie Alien is parasitic wasps. These are things that as entomologists we're, very familiar with and play with on a regular basis. There's another one that's sometimes referred to as ant lions that make these little pits and basically shoot sand at insects and then pull them down into those pits. That's basically Sarlacc from Star Wars, that thing that eats Boba Fett. It's like all these like cool concepts. You're like, oh man, this is basically like, this and that from that fiction movie. So it is like mini aliens. And, I think on this large scale that we see, they just seem so small and irrelevant. But when you start to learn about these like tiny little interactions and the role they play, it really is truly incredible. So that kept driving my passion in this field.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's awesome. And and I love that you can make it. And we'll talk a little bit more, I think, as this goes on about the like outreach and public. Hang on just a sec. Sorry. But what, buddy?
What is this?
It's well, I'll show you later. Okay. Hey, can you go get back in bed?
No.
Okay. Can you at least be quiet?
Mm-mm.
Go.
Hey.
Go on. Okay. Sorry.
No worries, man. No worries.
He's funny. So we'll talk, like I said, we'll talk a little bit more as we go on about the public education and the outreach side of what you do. But I think the ability to take these concepts, like we're talking about, from ant lions to everything else, to parasitic wasps, and make it approachable for the general public is such a big job, or a big part of our job as science educators.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing that's been kind of overlooked and being recognized as more important more recently, is that as scientists, it's not good enough to know how to do the science, but it's also equally important to be able to communicate that science to different levels of people, whether it be other academics or it be the general public, or it might be other specialty groups, and be able to cater that to those specific groups. And it's a great challenge. I think it's something you learn on the job. I mean, I don't think by any means this is something that I learned in college.
Oh no, they definitely don't teach us that in college for sure. I never learned.
Oh
it in
no,
no, I learned.
I didn't learn anything in college. No,
I learned maybe a couple of things, but not like, I remember. We talking. It was interesting because we would talk a lot about biological processes, and we would learn about things like, say, photosynthesis, and it would be communicated to us in a very like academic classroom structured sort of way. But the thing that I don't think necessarily got, or at least personally I never got, was how do I take this information and package it and send it back out? Right? How do
Right.
I do my job as a scientist or science communicator to close that feedback loop and take the work we're doing and all the research we've generated, like from the taxpayers' money, and give it back to them in a way? And so that's a big part of what I think Extension does well, and what I enjoy doing in my job. So you said you went to the University of, you said Eastern Ontario. Did I make that up?
Western Ontario.
It was one of those directions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Western Ontario.
You just knew it wasn't north because it's already north. So yeah,
right. It's so far north.
Yeah.
I've lived in Texas my whole life. So like pretty much anything past Oklahoma is Canada. I don't know.
Yeah.
So were you born and raised in Canada?
I was, yeah, about a couple hours away from Toronto, or also known as Toronto for people here. You have to like enunciate every syllable.
We do, yeah.
But yeah, I grew up mostly within 2 to 4 hours of Toronto, mostly in the town of London, Ontario. I lived about 1.5 to 2 years close to a small town just outside of Windsor called Belle River. And that area, unbeknownst to me at the time that my career would lead me in this way, but like one of the largest tomato glasshouse production areas is in that area. That's where Heinz Ketchup had all their, greenhouse facilities. I don't know if it's still around to this day, but so I spent a couple of years there as well. But yeah, mostly around kind of in the Toronto, I guess, area.
Okay. So how did you end up in East Texas? Because I imagine that's like some degree of culture shock. It's got to be.
Some degree. So yeah. So I have always been a bit of a chameleon. I've been very adaptable to different situations, and even in school growing up, and when I was a young boy, we used to move around almost every couple of years. So I always learned to learn about the people around me and adapt and kind of. Engage that or adopt that particular culture, at least be able to interact and be one with it, I guess, in a way. And so how did I end up down in Texas? After my master's degree, in integrated pest management at Simon Fraser University, that was West Coast Canada near Vancouver. I did a 6-month job on an organic farm, trying to learn what it's actually like to farm. So I got some context on my pest management, because I think it's really easy to give pest management advice to a grower without knowing, the day-to-day challenges that they're already facing. So I kind of want to know what it was like. What are the day-to-day challenges of actual farming? And so I did a little apprenticeship at Clippers Organics. It's a pretty famous organic farm there on the West Coast. And then from there, I was kind of looking for any type of work in entomology. And I must have just hit a bit of a lull at that point, because I couldn't find anything, at least in Canada at the time. And, I ended up getting I had one job working in an LED lighting shop, because there was the potential to, do research and do work in incorporating LEDs into agricultural production.
Yeah.
At the same time, I worked part-time for a startup company that was doing urban ag, so building glass houses within the city and selling directly to grocery stores. And I had at this point, probably 4 months. Actually, no, I did that for about a year. I did that probably for about 6 months. But 4 months in, I started applying to a bunch of different areas. I started getting almost a little bit desperate, because at first I was like, either close to home near Toronto or back near Vancouver. I was applying in those areas. At this point, I was kind of applying all over. I ended up getting a job relatively locally in the Niagara Falls region. But about 4 months into that position, it was a 1-year contract, and it was potentially renewed depending on funding. About 4 months in, I heard from Texas A&M. And I remember thinking to myself, like, Texas? Like, I don't even remember applying to Texas. And I was thinking to myself, like, if I were to move to the U.S., like here I am, it's like pompous Canadian, right? Like, if I'm going to move to the U.S., it's going to be to California or like to Boston or like some kind of like cool town, right? Like, why am I going to go to Texas? Well, they were flying me down for the interview. So I was like, worst case scenario, you know what? I get to see Texas. It'd be kind of fun.
Yeah.
So, I ended up coming down for the interview, and I was just so impressed by the people, the other faculty, the other entomologists that I met, the growers that I got to meet. that, I told myself, if I get this position, like I can't say no, like I can't refuse it. And just
Right.
the freedoms and the potential opportunities for growth that this position provided me was just, again, I couldn't say no. So, I was kind of crossing my fingers, hoping that I wouldn't get it, because I was like, I'm gonna have to move down to Texas. And about a few days later, I got the call. So the next thing I know, I'm about 2 months later, I want to finish off some work there, finish off the projects I was working on there before I came down. And I drove on down, and yeah, absolutely. So are you originally from Texas?
Yeah, I am actually. So I grew up here in Lubbock, where I live now, and I
Okay. So you're a West Texas guy.
I'm a West Texas guy. Yeah, born and raised here, but I went to A&M for my undergrad, and so I spent 5 years.
Oh, okay.
Who doesn't do a victory lap anymore?
Sure, right.
In College Station, and and so I love that part of the state too. I'm not used to the humidity, but because it's dry and flat and all the other things up here.
That must be nice. That this humidity. So one of the things that, as you can imagine, being a Canadian like penguin, wrong pole, but whatever, being a polar bear coming down to Texas, man, like the summers here, and I'm working in greenhouses. So it is, I actually bought myself an ice vest. I don't know if you've seen these. It's like a vest where you can pack ice in them. Yeah, otherwise I don't survive. I needed to create a little microclimate for my body for it not to just literally melt away into the ground.
Oh, it's brutal. It's brutal.
Oh my gosh. Well, and you see, and you're a native Texan. Now, mind you, you're used to the dry. Yeah, that humidity is definitely killer. And then the other thing too is, I'd realized I'd taken some things in Canada for granted. For example, being able to lie in the grass without being, eaten alive by fire ants.
Right.
Like I think I barely lay in the grass here. Whereas in Canada, like that was what you do. Like you just go outside and lay in the grass.
You may not in Texas. You may not survive the experience.
Exactly. You might die. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I learned the whole fire ant thing pretty quick. Which movie?
No, it's just a joke. It's like any movie that has to do with evil like ants and insects.
Oh yeah.
Pretty much it. Right. Someone lays in the grass with a piece of cake and then they die.
They swarm you right away and you're dead.
Yep.
Yeah.
So welcome to Texas. Yeah. What was the first? So the first time that you, looked at your phone or looked at the thermometer in your car and it said 110. What was that like for you?
Oh man. I remember, so again, doing a lot of my research in greenhouses, and in my case, I'm trying to isolate different insect populations within cages within greenhouses. And some of my trial work has been, these are large cages. Large is a relative term, 4 foot by 5 feet in dimensions and 3 feet tall. And so I actually put my whole body inside that cage. And in those cages, it would get up to like 115 or 117.
Oh my God.
When I'm in there, I'm just trying to get my work done and get out. I am like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. I have a little wet rag that I put over my forehead. I'm wearing a cooling vest, and I have 2 employees, one to my left and one to my right, constantly fanning grape leaves. Some kind of large leaves to cool me off. No, I wish I had that kind of budget. Yeah, no, but
your only job, you hire a student assistant. Your only job is to follow me around with this banana leaf
and just keep me from melting. If I start melting, you're fired.
Well, so that's good. So you're currently working on your PhD.
Correct.
Right?
Yes, I'm doing my PhD concurrently in this position. Yes.
Gosh, and so I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I'm trying to finish writing right now, and trying to get to a point where I can defend and not think about it anymore. But how has that been for you? Like balancing, because I know what it's been like in my own experience. But how has that been balancing like your work life and your personal life and your academic life and everything else?
Yeah. So, we were just talking about this earlier about how, we both have kids. Mine's about 10 and a half months and yours is about 4.
Yeah.
And that introduces a whole extra element in there as well. But for me, I was fortunate. I guess I timed it. We actually almost intentionally timed it in such a way so that I'd be done all my coursework and my prelim exams before my son was born. And so for anyone who is not familiar, the prelim or candidacy exams is this like grueling, 2 weeks of written exams given to you by your PhD committee. So that could be 4 or 5 other professors that basically just, they can make up whatever exam. So some might be like, 24-hour closed book exam. Others might say 1 week open book. And you have 2 weeks to finish all of these. You have to juggle them all, finish them. If they give you the thumbs up, then a week after those finish, you do an oral exam where they test you verbally in front of them and a whiteboard behind you in case they ask you any questions. So that's it's a 3-month. I mean, I know you're obviously familiar, but it's a 3-month study time and then, about 4 weeks of hell. And so that, we timed that all before Silas was born, because otherwise it would have been almost very, very challenging anyway for me. I don't know how you did it with your son being 4 years old.
Not very well. I survived it. I've survived it so far.
Yeah. Because at least I had my evenings and weekends. That's what I'd do. Every evening and weekend I'd come home from work and I'm studying, I'm working on my schoolwork. We would try and set aside 1 evening a week, my wife and I, to have a date night. Right. Or at least one afternoon, evening, if it was like a weekend sometimes, if my workload wasn't too heavy. Because otherwise you can just get too carried away with that workload.
Oh, for sure.
And that was it. It was just trying to, we almost had to prioritize some family or together time. And then everything else was work or school. So it's, it's busy, but I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What's your project on? What are you studying?
Yeah, so I'm studying. So have you seen Alien versus Predator?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just studying that movie for my PhD.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah. No. So it's somewhat related, but so poinsettia season is upon us, right? So these beautiful potted plants with the red bracts that we buy during Thanksgiving, Christmas time. It takes about 16 weeks for growers that receive. They get these little cuttings, little basically like broken off pieces of plant at their facilities. They stick them and they grow roots and they grow them out. From the time they get those stickings, the time they go out the door to you with color, takes about 20 weeks total.
Right.
And currently, they have this one major insect pest known as whiteflies. It's a sucking insect pest that, think of like mosquitoes, but of a plant. And so the plant can't swat at it, right? It's kind of just sitting there and it keeps sucking the plant's blood, its juices. And as a result, it can kill the plant. They reproduce really quickly, can overwhelm the plant. They also excrete or poop out essentially the sugary solution, which is basically the plant sap, the plant blood all over back onto the plant.
That's
refer to this. Yeah, right. When you think about it all in those terms, think from the plant's perspective, it's like, this is crazy. Like, do something. But so they excrete, they poop out this sugary solution that's sticky on the plant, and then this mold can grow on that sticky solution known as sooty mold. It's like this black soot-like mold, and so. Growers, farmers need to manage these whiteflies. Otherwise, by the time they get to you, the plant is dead.
Right.
And if you're not convinced, I think a lot of people are like, oh no, do natural, don't do anything, and they'll take care of the plant. Will take care of it. Man, if go to some grower facility, try growing 100 poinsettias yourself without spraying anything. And let me know when they're all dead, because it'll happen very quickly. These whiteflies will overwhelm. So right now, so I'm giving you like a long roundabout way of what my project is here. Because my project has nothing to do with poinsettias. No, I'm kidding. It does. So right now,
that was a good story, though.
Yeah, that's the whole story. So farmers right now have to spray. Well, I shouldn't say have to, but a lot of them do spray almost on a weekly basis some different insecticide to kill these whiteflies. Yeah. And now the problem is that we're starting to get more insecticide resistance. We have some populations, or some people would even say species, they're like cryptics. They look identical to other ones, but they're technically different, of whiteflies that are resistant to a lot of the insecticides that are commonly used. We also have, big retailers like Lowe's and Home Depot or Walmart that are telling growers they can't use certain classes of insecticides because of some major online petitions. More pesticide use regulations for pesticide applicators. All this kind of stuff is basically making pesticide use a potentially problematic solution if that's the only solution that these growers are relying on for whitefly management on poinsettias. So what I'm looking at is, can we in Texas use a predator and a parasitic wasp in combination to manage these whiteflies at the producer? So, there's been some earlier work done where people have used just these wasps. And I should clarify, these wasps and predatory mites, these tiny little spiders, essentially tiny, can't see them, are basically mass produced by these companies. These companies mass produce these things, are available for purchase. And there are places that already use them in a lot of greenhouses, but they tend to be more temperate type regions like the Northeast, Canada, and Europe. So it's a little bit different here in Texas. And, there's been some literature where they only use the wasp. And in using only the wasp, you end up getting some suppression of the whiteflies, but you have to release so much that it's very costly. And so I'm basically looking at, if you add in this predator as well, do you basically get like an alien versus predator scenario against the humans in this case being the whiteflies, to get some like additional, extra suppression, get some very good control of the whiteflies. And we're looking at rates, release rates that are going to be economically comparable to pesticide use. So basically they're not having to spend any additional money in order for this new strategy. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay. No, that's really interesting, because I know in my greenhouse, we whitefly are fairly generalist in nature. And so we fight them on pretty much everything in the greenhouse. Whitefly are like, hey, this is awesome, I'm going to hang out on this. And you knock them back. And then, like you said, a week or 10 days later, a couple of them come in through a crack in the greenhouse or whatever, and then they're back. Mm-hmm. And so that's really interesting research, because I think if for nothing else than from a public perception standpoint, if there's other methods of management that are non-chemical or whatever, I think that goes a long way towards moving the industry in a direction where, I say I'm using the word sustainably a little bit loosely, and I mean sustainably in terms of a public perception standpoint.
Right.
Or at least it's a tool in the toolbox, right? It's another thing that we can try.
Yeah, and that's the main idea. So, I think, some people, when I tell them about the type of work I'm doing, they're like, oh, that's amazing. Like, you're fighting the pesticide industry. And that's not at all the purpose of my research. It's not that I have any kind of fundamental issue with the use of pesticides, but rather by starting off with a biological control program, one in which relies on the release of beneficial insects, you have a pretty strong contingency plan. So if your whiteflies, the population start increasing, even if you're releasing your beneficial insects, you can then go in and start nuking, those whiteflies with insecticides. Right. Whereas if you start off with nuking them and the whiteflies are resistant and the populations keep coming up, you can't use beneficial insects. If you have this insecticide residue in there, it's usually going to take a little while for it to clear out before your beneficials can go back in. So, like you said, it's an extra tool in the toolbox that hopefully is a more effective and or more kind of what I want to say, like a systems strategy. It's just a part of a larger strategy for managing their pest.
Okay. No, that's really cool. I love that. And I love that approach to it. And I love the fact that it's not like, you don't do this anymore. This is not an option. Chemicals are blah, blah, blah. I think it's a good that we're looking at more of a, and you said you're an IPM guy. So we're looking at a integrated kind of holistic whole system approach to pest management and all of that. So
that's exactly it. Yeah.
I think what I kind of want to start wrapping up with is, let's talk a little bit, like we mentioned earlier, about public outreach and just working with the public. Because I know when I was with Extension, that was, that was my job, right? That's our job, is to take science to the people, as it were. What is, like, what kind of programming do you do? What's your approach to, and this may be a huge question that to answer, but what's your approach to science communication? How do you feel is the best way to approach taking all these concepts we're talking about and all of these what can really be complicated systems and distilling them in a way that anyone can understand?
So I think, I think that's a part of it. Like you said, taking something complicated and distilling it. In one sense, especially around controversial issues like pesticide safety, protecting pollinators, this class of insecticides known as neonicotinoids and their impact on pollinators. All of those types of subjects, rather than trying to simply just distill and give them a simple answer, I usually try and demonstrate how complicated the matter can be and why there's so much controversy and why things are never quite as simple as we like them to be. I think a lot of people think that science, if there's one publication, right, that says, X, Y, and Z, that, all scientists agree and that X, Y, and Z is true. And really any, someone who practices science knows that, scientific census is something that takes a lot of research, a lot of time, a lot of replication before you can really draw a particular conclusion. And so, science is very, like I said, it's detective work. And so for someone to read, a online blog that cites some kind of a science trade magazine that cites a research article, and to take those conclusions as fact is a kind of a fallacy. That is not, as a scientist, we know that's not true. As a scientist, I'd immediately go directly to that research, and I'm trying to investigate those answers and trying to see what other related research are and what they say, and if the answers are similar or not. And so when I'm talking about things like pesticide safety, for example, to the public, I'll talk about things like LD50s, lethal dose 50, right? Which is, what dosage of a particular chemical would cause, mortality in 50% of a population of rats, mice, or whatever it's tested on. And so, we look at things like glyphosate, which is Roundup, that has been in the news a lot, and something like table salt or caffeine is way more toxic. But then we're looking at, that's just acute toxicity. That's like immediate. How about chronic? Well, shoot, it's really hard to study chronic toxicity because, you would need a population of, maybe 10,000 people in a very controlled setting. And you ask half of them if they could get exposed to glyphosate at a specific rate, and control for every other factor. There's so many confounding, when we talk about confounding factors, like someone who's been spraying glyphosate, it's also likely, spraying a lot of glyphosate, it's also very likely that they spend more time outside, exposed to the sun more. It's more likely they're exposed to, air pollution and gas fumes outside. There's just all these other factors that can contribute to any type of health effect that make it very difficult to study chronic toxicity. So usually that's kind of what I'll do, is I'll take this approach of, here are some simple, easy things that we can study, but here's why we don't have the full answers for, this and why it's so controversial.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'll respond to that in a second. He comes in, he's like, yeah, he can't even hear you, but he's like responding to your questions. Buddy, I'm almost done. Can you give me like 5 minutes? Okay, I'll be right in there, okay?
Okay.
Love you. Okay. It was really funny. Okay. No, I'm glad we've got multiple
practicing his interviewing skills.
Yeah. We've got multiple tracks of this. But no, I think that's a really interesting approach and a really good approach to science communication, because it seems like the conventional wisdom in some ways that we use in the field is make it simple, get it out, and move on to the next thing, right? It's like, and which there's a place for that, I think. But I like your thought and your take on it that, science isn't simple, and these systems that we're dealing with are not like single points in space. They're complicated, and there's a lot that goes into it. So no, I really like that. And, I'm sure you do some of both, where you take it and you make very simple points, but then you also take these big issues and let them be big issues. And I really like that.
Yeah. Because there are some things that, are a little bit simpler to answer, that are simpler to study, and under certain assumptions we can make conclusions on them. But then there are other things that are still very controversial that I think making conclusions, for example, as a scientist, to say that we know glyphosate is safe for sure, in terms of chronic effects, I think we're doing the public a disservice, because we don't actually know that answer. And by saying that, I think that's where people's trust of science can be broken. I think that's one of the biggest problems when it comes to science, education and science communication, is not so much the science behind it or how we communicate it. It's sometimes just because people don't trust science anymore, because sometimes people under the name of science have made claims that are either not true, or we just didn't actually know the answer to it.
Right. Yeah. We make big sweeping claims maybe before we really should, rather than we really have the data to support it.
Right.
So we've kind of used up most of our time, but I've just got one last question for you.
Sure. Yeah.
One thing that I've been trying to do at the end of most of these episodes is almost a thank you for sticking with us and listening to all the science talk, is like a practical piece of advice, like from the different people that I'm interviewing. So and this is maybe not in what you do, maybe not an easy question to answer, but for the average, human who has a backyard or whatever, and is trying to control pests, or trying to, I'm going to go a different way with this. I'm going to start this question over.
Sorry, you can't. You've used up all of your do-overs.
Too late. I can't use them all again anymore. No. So I guess the question I have is for people wanting to get into entomology or into sciences. I've got a lot of friends whose kids are like all about it, right? They love the bees, they love pollinators and all of that. What would your piece of advice be for like a young human wanting to go learn more about insects?
Let me think about that here for a moment. I don't think about young humans all that often, although I have one now.
Except for the one.
Yeah, except for that one. In the context of advice related to entomology, if they want to learn about it, just give me a second here to.
No, that's fine.
Get some thought into that.
Well, I guess honestly, it doesn't have to be a young kid. I just mean, say someone that's planning out what they want to study, planning out their life and their career. We've talked about how it kind of twists and turns sometimes. So maybe a high school student that's interested in entomology. What would you just jump into it? Go find some bugs to start hanging out with?
I mean, for starters, I would say don't underestimate the opportunities in entomology, because insects are incredibly important, whether it comes to vectoring viruses, human viruses. Mosquitoes are the biggest animal human killer on the planet, whether it be West Nile virus or malaria or Zika, chikungunya, so on and so forth. Or you're looking at pests of agricultural commodities. They cause easy billions of dollars. I'm thinking of just one invasive insect pest, spotted wing Drosophila, which is a fruit fly of soft body fruit that in 1 year, when it was introduced, it caused about $500 million worth of yield losses. Wow. And so there's a lot of incredible opportunities to do research or do work in entomology, because they are insects again are incredibly important to our livelihood as humans. And if you're wanting to learn a thing or two, I mean, gosh, I'd say there's an incredible amount of online resources now. I would say start by trying to learn how to identify different types, different groups of insects, maybe starting at the level of order. So that's kind of a higher, we call it taxonomic level, is a way of grouping these different insects, and just start exploring. You can start collecting with a net, or just with your gloves or hands, and stick the bug in a freezer. And there's videos online of how to pin them, so you can start creating a little collection, so you can start learning about the different types of insects in your area, the types of things they do, and just kind of learn from there. I think it's all about just kind of growing your passion in entomology, over time.
That's awesome. Yeah, just go out and do it. Just get started.
Yeah. It's like, what? It's really like catching Pokemon, but real life. I heard the guy who created Pokemon was like, yeah, it's like he was actually inspired by insects because, they metamorphose, like they transform from one form to the next.
Right.
And a lot of insects do that too, and it's basically that. You're basically catching real Pokemon, and you get to do the extra detective work of figuring out what that insect is, figuring out its stats, its attack ability, its defense ability, and all that kind of stuff. And so, just get on out there and learn. It's all in your backyard.
That's awesome. Yeah, that very much appeals to like the video game and nerd in me. So yeah. I like that a lot. So hey, I really appreciate your time. Where can people find you? Do you want people to find you? Or are you trying to hide? What's your social media?
I am currently in hiding, but I will be out of hiding in the next 5 minutes. My social media is Six-Legged Aggie. Insects have 6 legs. So Six-Legged Aggie. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I have sixleggedaggie.com. And I just started a YouTube channel, but I have not yet published too much on there. But I plan on publishing some more content that's geared towards growers and the general public. So there'll be kind of different playlists depending on your interests.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
So am I. I hope it works out.
I think it'd be great. So, no, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate you taking some of your afternoon
so much.
to chat.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
And we'll maybe do this again sometime.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, we're clear.
I've been saying since this started that not nearly enough of my guests make their own sound effects and busy tones and all of that. I don't think I've ever said that, but I'm going to start saying that. So if you're a future guest, feel free to make your own sound effects. It's great. It's wonderful. Do the thing. Thanks so much again for listening. I hope you really enjoyed that. I think it was a fun episode, and I think I learned a lot from it. Again, just like from everyone else, I have learned a lot. Hook up with us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. There's a really great Facebook group now called Planthropology's Cool Plant People. So if you're one of those cool plant people, which I know you are, join the Facebook group. There's lots of great conversation. You'll get to hear from some really cool other plant nerds like you and me. If you want to support the show on Patreon, hit up patreon.com/planthropology. Again, March is going to be awesome. There's lots of content coming at you. You'll get to hear from me, maybe more than you want to. So stick around, follow, subscribe, rate, review, do the thing. I love reading them, and it really helps us out. But I'll see you next week, actually 1 week from today, with a recording of Planthropology Live from LubbockCon, where I talk about super nerdy stuff like sci-fi and fantasy and plants and world building and everything in between. You've been great. See you next time.
Okay, we're clear.